Our second speaker is unarguably the most successful male downhill World Cup racer of all times. 4 times world champion, 3 times World Cup Series champion, 22 wins. Coming off his 86th podium just a few weeks ago, Greg Minnaar.
Thank you, Elliot. I got asked to do a bit of a talk, and I think some of you guys have noticed that Elliot does change the goalpost as he starts something. So I was testing all of last week, and Saturday morning I said to my wife, I'm just going to sit in and get this speech kind of done. And called Elliot Saturday evening to find out what the audience is, and that's also changed as well through the course of the speech. So I then met up with Elliot this afternoon to find out a bit more, and everything changed again. So I decided that I'm going to call Elliot on to join me and mix things up as well.
As you can tell, Greg really doesn't like doing work. So what the goalpost, I guess, changed to, or was the same the whole time, was what is the business of athletes? And I wanted to kind of structure the talk around this idea of what do you do after racing, and then also contract negotiations. And I think the first question to you is, I love that you just get to sit here. And at what point did you start thinking about that? What are you going to do after racing?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that hasn't changed, because Elliot, as we know, can surprise us. So we're talking about it today, and one of the most commonly asked questions that I've always had is what are you going to do after racing? And most athletes, I mean, and I'm speaking mainly for myself, we didn't have a plan B. Didn't finish college, we didn't study anything. We were all in on racing, and so it's a good question, but people commonly ask it, and I've always felt like we're always unsure of what we're going to do. So for me, the big plan in racing was to try and build some kind of revenue stream while using racing and in and around it. So, we're talking about what are those things. And for me, it was product. I mean, being an athlete and spending so much time on a bicycle, you get to feel things in a different way. You know the 10,000 hour rule, but we sit on these bikes, we're using the brakes, we're pedaling everywhere. We understand this product so well. So getting in the back end of product development was a kind of natural progression, and I really enjoyed it. I love trying to build the best product out there.
And so maybe a question along that is, like, how do you realize what your specialty is? Like, for you, it is product development. How did that show up? I know you mentioned, maybe one of the first places was the shoes.
Yeah, so 510 and myself came out with the first clipless pedal and clipless shoe, sorry. And that was a really interesting product, because 510 had this incredible rubber, and they didn't have a clipless shoe. And I just couldn't understand why we were using, back then we kind of almost had like a plastic sole. And if we could get this rubber onto a mountain bike shoe, and especially in downhill where your feet are off for quite a few corners at least, so it would make the downhill shoe a lot better. So we worked on that. That was in 2011, but it was also at that time I got into cycling because my dad retired. He worked at Coca-Cola as a salesman for 30-something years, and he, with his retirement, he bought a bicycle shop, and we still have no idea why he ended up buying this bike shop.
Is that how you got that?
That's how I got into bicycles. So I always rode BMXs and hung out, and my main sport was motocross. And so I raced motocross all the way through till I was a teenager, and then my parents bought this bike shop. But in 2011, as I was doing this shoe, my father got really ill, and I took over the bike shop. So not only was I racing World Cups, but now I was a retailer.
Greg, you changed the name to Greg Minnaar Cycles?
Straight away. No, so for me it was another way to understand the market a bit better, because as a retailer you've got to move the stock. Cash flow is everything in a bike shop, and it's not very easy. So from creating that product as a shoe to then understanding the retail side a bit better, my next project was a knee pad, and it was funny enough in a pub having a beer, and I was sitting with a product developer and talking about this the problem I have with knee pads is when I was on the podium a lot more and winning races, I kind of get excited straight after the race and after the podium, and I'd find myself ending up at these parties and team dinners, and I'd still be in my riding kit. And the worst thing is the knee pads. I mean, they start to smell after a while if you wear them too much. And so I was really interested. We were talking about zippers. I'm not quite sure why. I can't really remember. But you get these really flexible zippers. So we started talking about the zipper, and then I was thinking about this problem that I have at World Cup racing. And so we basically included a zipper into a knee pad, which ended up being the brand's biggest selling product, winning innovation awards. And it was also, I could pull the knee pad off without having to take my shoes off, without having to take my pants off. I could just pull my pants down halfway, whip the knee pads off, and keep partying for the night. So it was a great solution.
And I love that. I love that that was where the innovation came from. I just can't get to the party quick enough. And that has kind of been a consistent theme. I mean, I think we all know you as this amazing racer, and one of the high points of your career, I think, for all of us was when you were on Honda. And I thought that was interesting that you were saying that you took a pay cut to ride for that team so you could kind of develop your product development muscle. And so that same thing that has kind of been a kind of a core theme and what you think about, like even you thought about in the opportunities that you took.
Yeah, I think I had some good guidance in my younger years, and that was one of the moves that I thought, Honda being like the biggest motorcycle producer, and just the experience I'd learned from developing this incredible bike with them. So that in itself was amazing. So I took a path. I was very lucky. I was 19 when I won my first World Cup overall, and 21 when I won the World Championship, and then I had this opportunity to either continue with the brand I was or to move to Honda. And Honda were just entering into the bike scene with this incredible gearbox mounted in a bike. And so I felt like this was a great opportunity to learn a whole new game. And it was, from Honda going testing with this company was incredible. You'd do one run down a track you don't even know, and you'd need to answer at least 10 questions on how did the bike feel, what was the handling like, what didn't you like, and meantime you're just trying to figure out how to get down. So it was, it was a very good learning curve from testing to developing and just understanding the engineering of a bike.
And so I think a lot of people are like, cool, this is great. If I'm Greg Minnaar, then maybe I can get a signature shoe, or I can ride for the biggest motor corporation in the world. But contracts, I think people think of as this kind of static thing that you just get and you either say yes or no to. But that's not true, right? Like, contracts are so malleable and you can put things in them. And so maybe in the context of product development, like, how would you structure a contract so that you, as an athlete, could make money off of that outside of maybe royalties or something?
Yeah, it's always tough. I think if you can kind of plan ahead or think about it a little bit further than just what you're doing at the moment, I try and fit in just a very simple clause just to cater for that, and usually the brands are quite keen to work on it, because if you're going to help get behind a product to make the product better in any kind of way, it's only benefits the brand as well. So yeah, it's definitely worth trying to include it, even if you might not exercise it. It's worth having it in a contract. And
that be like, we were talking about it being like this what if clause, right? Like, what if you say, what happens if I am working with you on product development, or we develop a new knee pad, do I get maybe not royalties, but it's like, cool, like give me $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 based on you kind of quote unquote hiring me as a product developer.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's the what if. What if this does happen? And it can be really good. I mean, if you get behind a product, and it's not always like a signature product. I mean, I personally, a signature product is great. I personally try and avoid them because I feel like it narrows down the audience. Not everyone is a Greg Minnaar fan, but if you make a great product, everyone might buy it. So I feel it just broadens your retail space. So we're talking a lot about that. It's really interesting, but it's something that I wish I had a bit more experience on when I was younger, and obviously I've learned over the time. And the what if is an important thing to include.
And maybe to kind of like wrap up, for young athletes, what should they think about in a contract beyond just, what products you're giving me or how much you're paying me for this? Like, when you go into a contract negotiation, what are the things that you're thinking about?
Yeah, contracts are tough. It's planning ahead, planning for the unforeseen. And normally, regularly you wouldn't really go back into a contract, but sometimes there are disputes, and that's really what the contract's there for, is to figure the way out through the dispute. So it's not easy. I've always tried to take on the contracts and do it all myself. I had an agency when I was young, and I felt like I hadn't really studied. I'd finished school early to race mountain bikes, and I hadn't really learned a lot of, felt like I needed some education. And so I've made mistakes along the way, but it's also been really a good learning curve.
And maybe the last question is just, why is it so important to find that champion? Why is it so important to find that champion in a brand? You talked a lot about Rob Roskopf when you were at Santa Cruz.
Yeah, I mean, Rob was a very influential guy. I mean, if you look at what we did with the 29-inch wheel and bringing that to life, if it wasn't for Rob going to companies like Fox and going, we need a fork to fit the wheel in, or going to like Envy to make a 29-inch downhill wheel, it wouldn't have happened. So you need someone to back you up. I had the idea of trying to get this 29-inch bike into racing. It wasn't my idea. I'd seen this bike before. I had seen a kid in the UK actually riding this homemade downhill bike with 29-inch wheels, but he had like cross-country tires on and cross-country rims, so he barely finished the race. I remember seeing him at Fort William just flatting everywhere, and it didn't really work out. But he was a little bit ahead of the time. And so when we came around to trying to develop this downhill bike, it's kind of like a chicken and egg scenario. You can have you can easily make a 29-inch wheel frame, but if you don't have the fork or a downhill tire or a downhill rim, you need the whole package. And so if you've got someone like Rob who's backing you, who can actually move the needle, you can push those projects across the line.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that's been so important for me in my career. I mean, it might not be a CEO, it could be a marketing coordinator or HR or whatever, but finding that, building those relationships and cultivating like the human relationships so that you can get to know people. And back to what Blake and Bass and Jess were saying, is that alignment, and that could be with one person in the brand. So thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
So our first question is from Oakley. What are... Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to laugh. What are some of the key things sponsors look for in an athlete, especially riders that aren't very well known?
What are the key things? Yeah, it's interesting because I'm kind of moving into that position to look for riders to join our Norco race division. So it's, for me, it's character. I think to me that goes a long way. And of course, riders, or especially in racing, you need to be able to perform and perform on every weekend, and not just, you can't just be hot and cold. It's almost on demand. So performance is up there, but character to me is everything.
That's not from the brand Oakley. That's from a person named Oakley. Sorry. Oakley is also one of the sponsors of the event. I didn't get a last name on that one. But Oakley, you just won a Norco clothing grab bag. Congratulations. Okay, we have another question from Candace D. In a room full of aspiring athletes, what is your advice to help them figure out their what will I do after racing?
Sure, yeah, that's... I don't even know what I'm going to do after racing. I think this industry is a great industry to be in, from an athlete into marketing jobs into product. I feel like coming from an athlete side, going into product is the right direction. I think we spend so much time with the product, we get a better feel than probably most product developers do. So there's definitely value to be added, testing product and giving feedback.
Well, thank you so much. Candace, you just won a pair of VIP Joyride passes, courtesy of SRAM. And our last question is from Carlos Sanz Aguilera. What tip or idea would you give to yourself 20 years ago? Would you change something about your athletic career?
Yeah, I definitely would have changed a lot of stuff. I mean, I didn't think that I'd be racing at 42 years old and still standing on podiums. That didn't cross my mind at all. I thought my career would kind of end into my early 30s. So I guess I got involved in a lot of business, in a lot of different businesses over the time. And I think, although it's been a great experience and I can't really complain about it, I find it has distracted me a little bit from racing at times. And I would prefer to just focus solely on racing. But again, I was trying to plan ahead and plan for my future. I think that transition for an athlete, going from an athlete into the workspace, is probably going to be the most changing or biggest change in my life, or in an athlete's life. So trying to figure out a solution for that. So we were talking about earlier, like product, and the reason we came up, the reason I like going into product is one of my early examples was Dave Cullinan, which was the 1992 world champion, great guy. Dave retired in, I think it was 2000, and I remember he had a pedal called it was called the Cully, and it was a little bit ahead of its time. It was a lot narrower than most pedals, and back then everyone was running these really big pedals, especially on flat pedal. And I remember seeing this pedal, for sale 8 years later. And so Cully had created obviously a signature product, and that kind of would have transitioned him to normal life a lot easier than finishing racing and then trying to figure out what to do.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Carlos. You win a Norco clothing grab bag. Congrats. Thank you so much, Greg. Another round of applause for Greg here.